So I'm Lillian Seymour, and I'm she. I was born in Pine Falls, Manitoba, but I grew up in Seymourville. I used to sit at my grandfather's feet, and he would be rocking his chair. He'd sit on this rocker and he'd smoke this pipe, and he'd put the pipe down and he'd play the violin. So I would listen to the violin playing at his feet. So every time I think of my best childhood memories, that always the first one that comes up. Well, we had my parents fostered some really tough young women, and so they got into all kinds of problems and stuff. And I thought, oh, I would never do this. I would never want to do this. I would never want to put myself in that situation. And also, like, I ended up babysitting them a lot of times. So I babysat all these foster kids that were so, because my dad took teenagers, my dad and my mom took teenagers, so they were really rebellious, you know, and run away and want to fight and all this stuff. So I thought they were bad. Back then, I thought they were bad. I labeled them as bad, and, you know, like, and so I, at that time, thought I would never in my life do that with my family. For me, when I was growing up and my parents had foster children, it was by the provincial government. At that time, back in the 60s, they just came in and took Aboriginal children out of homes just because they were poor. Not because they weren't taken care of, but because they were poor. And then they were taken out all over, put out all over, and the Aboriginal communities, First Nations communities, did not look after their own foster care system. So in the last so many years, Aboriginal people have been given back that policy where they are now mandated to look after their own children. The only thing is now they're mandated and they can look after their own children, but then they still have to follow the provincial guidelines. So when they follow the provincial guidelines, they're still not really looking at the holistic system that Aboriginal people used to follow. So we're still looking at just following this straight line provincial thing. If you go out of whack or you stray a little bit, your children may be taken. And a long time ago, before the provincial systems came into care, the whole family, the whole community looked after the family, helped supported the family to get back on track so these children will be looked after. So it was the community that helped support the whole family and the children. So when I'll give you a perfect example. I had a little girl. She was 6 years old. She was brought to my home. Me and my children, I have 2 children, we were standing there at the window watching her. And she's looking from the vehicle at us. And the social worker is pulling her out on this side. And the other social worker is pulling her out on this side. And they're pulling her and she's being tugged and she's screaming. And she's telling them how much she hates us and hates them. And they drag her into my home and they leave her there. And I have a little 6-year-old who is terrified of me, screaming her head off. So all I can do is say to her, when you're done, I'll be here waiting. So I just sat there and let her scream and scream and scream and scream. 4 hours later, when she couldn't scream anymore, she asked me, well, where do I sleep? So I showed her the room and I gave her something to eat, and then that's all. And I just went from there, helping to build her trust, letting her scream when she wanted to scream, being there when she needed a hug, and just, that's all. That's all I could do for her. And then she ended up trusting me.